If there was a motto for a tactics build, it would be, there's no way for the enemy to hit me if they can't get anywhere close to me. Tactics builds are really all about doing as much damage as you can from as far away as possible from the enemy, or from getting through their defenses in some way, or luring them in some way into the position you want them to be so that you can attack them the best. Today we're taking a look at tactics builds in Dead Cells and what you should look for specifically when you're going after a tactics build. Probably one of the first weapons you ever saw when you were playing through Dead Cells that you actually had fun using was the electric whip. Let's be honest, it's the one that helps you clear through the most enemies as possible in new biomes. And if you're playing on the most recent version of 1.9, it has the benefit of actually having shock damage over time as well. So it's an extra added bonus to, honestly, a pretty good weapon to get you pretty far, pretty early on in your playing with Dead Cells. Or even earlier than that, you probably picked up the bow instead of the shield the first time you walked into Dead Cells. Because, let's be honest, having two weapons seems a lot better than having just one and a piece of wood to protect you that's sort of a shield. Hopefully by now, if you've watched the other episodes of this tutorial series, you know you should be picking up the shield and really getting used to that. But a bow still serves its purpose. There are some really good ranged weapons within Dead Cells, and most of them will scale with tactics. With the exception of the 4 crossbows in the game, everything else is going to scale with tactics if you pick up a ranged weapon. Now, one thing I would advise you if you're going to be picking up the electric whip is to find a way to switch off of it before you get to the concierge or your first boss. While yes, you can take out a boss with the electric whip, it's going to be very slow and tedious compared to other weapons. The main reason for this is there is no crit condition with a whip. You're doing just base damage every single time you attack, and while that's fine for biomes where chaining together your lightning towards multiple enemies at a single time, you really need to pull off those crit conditions to get a lot more consistency when fighting bosses. There are, fortunately, other whips in the game that also do the same thing the electric whip does around getting around shields and doing some really fast, rapid damage. One specific whip that you can pick up that builds with tactics is the Valmont whip. It has the benefit of having the tip of the whip do crit damage, so it takes a little bit of learning on exactly how far away to stand to do this crit damage, but it really does help you melt through enemies pretty quickly and can do a fair share of damage on bosses as well. Specifically with the concierge, this is a fun whip as you can stand outside of the concierge's aura and still get crit damage on him. For my money though, when I'm going with a tactics build, I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for a bow specifically with crit damage, or some type of a ranged damage over time weapon as my 1-2 punch. The second thing I'm looking for is things in my offhand with my skills and deployable traps and grenades to actually do additional damage to kind of augment that. A nice thing about tactics builds is being able to toss either a grenade or a deployable trap onto a level above or below you and really just stand back and let those traps do their work. I mean, after all, if you're going tactics build, you're going to have the least amount of HP. That's just how it works. But since you're trying to stay as far away from enemies as possible, that can actually be okay. You're not in striking distance, so you don't need as much HP. Now, if you don't have the quick bow yet, this is actually one that you can pick up from the starting area. Just check to the left a little bit, and you might be able to find a blueprint. The quick bow is actually one of my favorites. It fires off really quickly. It is the quick bow after all. And the third arrow and beyond that's stuck in an enemy will crit. Now, I'm sure as you're playing along, you'll see things like lightning and ice shards, and firebrands, and the flamethrower. All those are great as well. In fact, honestly, a really fun thing to do against the concierge or really any boss is bring in some electricity and some ice and some fire and just watch them melt. A tactics build really has the capability of just wrecking some of the intermediary bosses that you run across. It actually can do pretty good on the Hand of the King as well. Now, if you're in love with your shields, you can still use shields. As I mentioned in the Brutality episode, it's okay to pick up a shield that is not scaling for your build and just use that as a shield to get parries. Now, there is the parry shield that you can go after, which, if you want to know where that is, that's technically to the right of the double locked doors in Stilt Village, but you know, it's besides the point. I'll leave it to you to figure out exactly how to get there, or I'm sure you can look up other tutorials how to get there. I don't want to spoil everything for you, though. The parry shield does scale with tactics, so that's of course a great pickup if you're doing a tactics build, but honestly you can pick up anything. If you've got a build that's built on ice, go ahead and pick up the ice shield. It won't do the damage you're looking for, but it will do the freeze in order to give you more of that frost for your other weapons to build on. So once you get through Prisoner's Quarters, you're going to be looking at mutations. And there actually are a fair amount of pretty decent tactics-based mutations depending upon what you're doing. If you're using a bow and arrow, and that's actually what you plan to use for your entire run, definitely think about taking additional ammo from the colorless mutations area. There's nothing worse than being in a boss fight and running out of arrows. There's obviously also the Ripper mutation you can grab if you're doing arrows and a melee weapon. Personally, I really like Predator if you have that unlocked. That allows you to be invisible for a little bit of time after you kill an enemy. There's also things like networking, which allows any damage with arrows to be shared against any enemy that has an arrow stuck in them. So that's a great way to kind of spread the love around. Depends upon your playstyle. I tend to focus on one enemy at a time, so that doesn't work as well for me, but I have seen many players actually do really well with the networking mutation. There's a lot of great things that you can do, and of course, any of the colorless mutations as well are great picks for a tactics build. The main thing to think about is you're not going to have a ton of HP, and so you want to do whatever you can to either slow enemies, give yourself more of a chance to get away or attack without being targeted directly. And finally, I wasn't really sure to bring it up because it's a little bit of a late blueprint for you to pick up, but if you progress a little bit in the game and find yourself with the Owl blueprint, that's actually a fun one for a tactics build as well. It's pretty much a glass cannon because the way the Owl works is the Owl will fly around and attack for you with ranged attacks, but as soon as you get hit, the Owl goes on cooldown and goes away for a while. It's not too long of a cooldown, but it's still the fact that if you're relying upon the Owl to give you a lot of that damage, then you have to make sure you're building the rest of your build around not getting hit as much as possible. It's a fun build. It can certainly take you all the way through Hand of the King, but it's definitely something that is a little bit more tricky of a build to do if you want to go after that. Now, fortunately with tactics, both the root grenade and the wolf traps do scale with your build, so I would look for those as just a go-to because there are a lot of things that will work better when your boss or your enemies are rooted. Well, that's about all the advice I can give you for a tactics build that I actually haven't mentioned in another video. Of course, always be looking for the affixes that you can re-roll, look for things that synergize within your build, look for weapons that work well together, use shields whenever you can. I mean, all of those things definitely still apply here. But hopefully this has helped you figure out what to specifically look for within tactics when you're doing a tactics build. This is the end of my How to Not Suck at Dead Cells series. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please do consider subscribing and leave me a like. That does help me out a lot. Our next series we're going to look at the relatively new indie game Monster Train, which is a deck building roguelite that I've been getting into. I'm going to go into how to not suck at Monster Train, so if that's of interest to you, please do also subscribe so you can make sure to see when those videos do drop. And if you're still listening at this point, let me just say thank you. I do appreciate you. And until next episode, stay safe and happy gaming.